Have you ever wondered why incredibly talented people often just sabotage their own success to keep the peace? Today, in this explainer, we're exploring a fascinating phenomenon that plays out in offices and homes literally everywhere. Yet somehow it usually goes completely unnoticed by everyone, except, of course, the person who's actively exhausting themselves.
I want you to ask yourself honestly, are you routinely dialing back your capabilities? Are you burning yourself out just so you don't intimidate the people around you? I mean, imagine if you focused entirely on your own goals. You could probably operate at 120% capacity, right? But instead, do you constantly hit the pause button to manage the emotions, the workloads, and the fragile egos of everyone else in the room?
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to look at the overaccommodation paradox, the psychology of self-sacrifice, culture and high sensitivity, the shift to autonomy, and finally, protecting givers at work. Let's dive in. Starting right off with Section 1, the overaccommodation paradox. Okay, get this. 80. Here is the wild part about that number. Many brilliant individuals intentionally cap their output at about 80%. Think about every group project or collaborative office meeting you've ever been a part of. There's almost always that one highly competent person who holds back just a little bit. They take that remaining 20% of their energy and use it to act as a human shock absorber. They're the ones smoothing over all the interpersonal friction, quietly fixing everyone else's mistakes before the boss even notices, and making absolutely sure everyone feels psychologically safe. Now sure, this fine-tuned support absolutely elevates the entire team. But we have to step back and ask, is this immense self-suppression actually sustainable? Because while the rest of the team feels like they are flying high and achieving incredible things, the person providing all that invisible lift is operating way, way below their actual ceiling. They are literally sacrificing their own joy, their ambition, and their energy, all just to make sure the boat doesn't rock.
Which brings us to Section 2, the psychology of self-sacrifice.
So it turns out, this is actually a highly intelligent survival mechanism. Highly capable givers use self-sacrifice to basically erase the target on their back. You know the saying, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down? Highly talented individuals face constant risks of jealousy or even outright sabotage. By limiting their own output and aggressively helping others, they cleverly transform potential enemies into allies. Most people out there are matchers who absolutely love to see selfish takers fail, but they will actively protect a generous giver. The real tragedy here, though? While these self-sacrificing givers survive the initial social dynamics, they suffer a completely different fate down the road: severe, long-term burnout.
And if we look deeper through the lens of clinical psychology, this chronic people-pleasing often stems from childhood trauma. If a child grows up in a volatile home, they learn incredibly early on to basically become the adult. They adopt these survival behaviors, subjugating their own needs, hiding their overwhelm, or faking agreement just to secure safety and love from unpredictable caregivers. Fast forward to adulthood, and these deep-rooted schemas translate directly into the exhausting workplace symptoms of a chronic people-pleaser. They hide their extreme overload and automatically say whatever you want, absolutely terrified that speaking up will cause a catastrophic rejection. Moving right along to Section 3, culture and high sensitivity. In many cultures, particularly in places like East Asia, there's a really heavy emphasis on reading the room. But there is a massive difference between actively cooperating for mutual benefit and passively killing your own ego just to avoid friction. When you cross into what researchers call passive cooperativeness, well, you aren't actually collaborating anymore. You're really just trying not to exist too loudly. And the tragic irony here? By playing such a bland, non-threatening role to ensure no one is ever slightly inconvenienced by you, you actually fail to build deep, genuine, trusting relationships with anyone. We also have to look at the biology of it all. About 15 to 20% of the population are what's known as highly sensitive persons, or HSPs. Their nervous systems naturally run deep using the dose framework: deep processing, overstimulation, empathy, and sensing subtleties. Now, this sensitivity is an absolute superpower for quality control. But drop them in a noisy open office with constant, urgent demands, and they'll short-circuit. They just absorb everyone's conflicts and get overstimulated so rapidly. But here's the good news. Simple structural fixes, like allowing asynchronous communication, offering hybrid work, and explicitly defining when a task is officially done, can completely stop their nervous systems from going into that self-sacrificing overdrive. Okay, so how do we fix this at the individual level? That's Section 4, the shift to autonomy. True well-being requires this great concept from psychology called autonomy. It's the feeling that your actions align with your own intrinsic values, not just an unending obligation to please everyone else. So here is a 3-step transition to shift from an exhausted self-sacrificer into an other-oriented giver, someone who genuinely cares about others but has an equally fierce interest in their own success. Practice fierce self-compassion, develop emotional assertiveness, and strictly filter out those takers.
Step 1 is a big one. It requires unlocking what researchers call mama bear energy. This means you absolutely have to stop viewing your own anger or frustration as some kind of personality flaw. When you feel completely resentful at work, that is not a sign that you're being selfish. It is literally a biological alarm bell ringing to tell you your boundaries are being violated. You have to start treating yourself with the same fierce protection a mother bear gives her cubs. You are allowed to say no to protect your own dignity. And this leads us to such an amazing concept, the disagreeable giver. I love this. They might seem a little rough on the outside, sure, but they actually provide the most honest support possible without draining themselves dry. A disagreeable giver isn't just going to smile and nod when a project is obviously doomed to fail. They will give you the harsh truth because they genuinely care about the team, but they absolutely refuse to be a doormat. Ironically, by being willing to cause just a little bit of friction, they become the most valuable assets in any organization. Finally, let's wrap things up with Section 5, protecting givers at work. Because here's the reality. Individuals cannot fix this all on their own. A toxic workplace will eventually break down even the absolute strongest boundaries. Organizations have got to step up. First, they need 360-degree reviews to expose the takers. Those manipulative people who kiss up to management while ruthlessly exploiting their peers. Second, all that invisible shock absorber work we talked about earlier, that has an official name, organizational citizenship behavior. Companies need to stop treating this as free volunteer work and start making it a transparent metric for promotions and raises. And finally, they must enforce a strict right to disconnect after hours, no exceptions. When these systemic changes and your own personal boundaries finally align, magic happens. You no longer have to suppress your capabilities just to survive the workday. You can finally abandon that completely outdated virtue of silent self-sacrifice. By establishing crystal clear boundaries, your empathetic nature remains entirely intact, but your natural talents are fully, unapologetically liberated. So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with this. Isn't it time you stopped over-accommodating the world and started giving your greatest talents the spotlight they actually deserve? You really don't have to choose between being a kind, supportive teammate and being a wildly successful, unstoppably autonomous force. You can, and for sure, absolutely should, be both.